My name is Gianni Russo, a.k.a. Carlo, the infamous son-in-law from The Godfather. I'm now known as the Hollywood Godfather, and this is my story.
Before all of the wins in my portfolio, I was a little boy diagnosed with polio. Experimenting with cures, I tried every one. Felt everything in my right, but my left was numb. Walking with a limp, like will I ever run? Once again, or is this it? Am I forever done? Living in the hospital was never fun. Some people were cool, but not everyone. You never know who you're lying in a room with. So I broke a broomstick in half and let it groove with the concrete in the bathroom floor. It had a new tip, stashed it behind the toilet in case I ever had to use it. Cause one day Dolores had a chat with me. Said she got...
Speak softly loud and hold me warm against your heart. I hear your words, the tender trembling.
Welcome, everybody, for another episode of Hollywood Godfather podcast. I'm starting to feel like we're a news bureau now because we are on such current events. We are normally telling stories of the past. This is a combination of the past, a book that was written that I knew the gentleman is written about, know the kids, even the grandkids, and we have the author with us. But first, let me introduce my compadre, my co-writer, Pat Picciarelli, co-host of the show.
Thank you.
And I'm going to give Pat the honors of introducing the writer that's joining us and a friend I met and talked to numerous times while they were writing the book. And Pat, if you do the honors, please.
Okay, it is an honor indeed. The name of the book is Columbo, The Unsolved Murder by Don Capria and Edward Columbo. We're privileged this evening, tonight, to have with us Don Capria. Welcome to the show, Don.
Thank you both for having me on. It's a pleasure to meet you, Patrick, and Gianni. It's great to see you, as always.
Yeah, I mean, we're going through something that all of us lived through or indirectly, or Pat through writing my book, you writing your book. But I was on the ground with Joe Columbo those days. It's so crazy.
Yeah.
52 years ago when I first met him. I knew him prior to that, but then when he hired Barry Slotnick and I saw an avenue for me with my ego to become a movie actor, and he worked his magic. I don't know, Don. Did you read James Patterson's new book?
I'm almost through it. So with Barry Slotnick, of course. Anthony Jr. read it. We both saw it when it came out. I just started a new book, which is more on The Godfather. I've been on such a Godfather kick lately, which is Mark Seal's book.
He was on our show. He's a good guy.
I love Mark. Mark, we interviewed each other during the time that I was writing the Columbo book, and Mark and I have stayed in touch. He's actually one of the blurbs on the back of my book. So yeah, really great guy and a great writer.
Right.
Could you tell us the history behind you writing this book?
Yeah, the try to make it as brief as possible. I was working on a project, a scripted series. I was mainly a screenwriter, and I was writing a show about Italian kids growing up in Westchester. It was loosely based on my life. And a friend of mine that I knew called me up randomly while I'm doing that show and said, hey, would you ever be interested in doing something on Joe Columbo? And I had mentioned to people prior to that I wanted to do Joe Columbo's life story. And they had always told me, well, the children are still alive. You would need a blessing to do anything with that. So I just left it alone. And then this person that I got on the phone with, his name was Ray Vanacore, who Gianni also knows. He called me and just started quizzing me and said, look, we're looking for another writer. And would you like to meet Anthony? I said, sure. So he said, Sunday, meet us at this diner in upstate New York. So I got in a car, left Astoria, drove to upstate. At about 10:30 in the morning, I sat down at a big round table at a nice diner, and we had eggs, and it was Anthony. It was his son, Anthony Jr. It was Ray Vanacore and Driver, and we all just talked a little bit about what I knew from Joe Columbo's life story and why I would be interested in doing it. And I think I wowed them. I think at that meeting, Anthony was very interested to see that I knew so much about things like COINTELPRO and the possible FBI cover up with the shooting, and a lot about the Italian American Civil Rights League and some of the other people that were involved in the league besides just Joe and, you know, the Godfather film. So that was the dawn of the whole thing. And then it was a 3-year project.
Okay, well, there's been a lot written about Joe Columbo, of course, because of who he was, and of course the shooting. But you approach it from a different point of view. Could you tell our listeners about that?
Yeah, I mean, I had a pretty hefty task in front of me, not to just be able to write the book by myself. I was writing it along with Anthony Columbo, Joe's oldest son, Anthony Edward Columbo. Yeah. And, you know, with Anthony's point of view, there was always going to be this possibility of someone saying, "Oh, this is a whitewash," and he's not going to paint a perfect picture of his father. You know, he made some rules in the beginning, and once I knew the rules for the book, it was easy for me to move forward. And the main rule was, I don't want to print anything about my father that I didn't know. And up until the time of my father's shooting, I never believed my father was a mobster. There were times where I thought he was because of what was happening in the media. My father would get arrested, but he would always get out. And he would always say, "Don't believe what the newspapers tell you. Don't believe these FBI men." And Anthony was harassed by the FBI from the time he was like 19 years old until his father's shooting. And then, of course, later on, his lifestyle changed and he got involved in criminal activity. But up until that time, he said, "I'm not going to speak to you about my father's criminal side, but I give you full permission to interview people and get information about that and have us put it into the book."
How old was he at the time of his father's shooting? Do you know?
25 years old.
Okay, so he knew what was going on with his father's life and background by that time, I would assume.
No, at that time, again, he told me, and in the last 2 years prior to the shooting, his father was arrested like 5 times. Yeah. And all of it just on trumped up charges. And, you know, mentioning Barry Slotnick, his attorney, you know, even Barry said that everything that he was facing at the time of the Italian American Civil Rights League, he was going to beat. There was really nothing except for the real estate lying on an application that gave him the, I forget what the exact charges at the moment, but that was the only case that he was going to end up having to do time for.
Yeah, I was in the on the NYPD at the time. He was picketing the FBI building at 69th and 3rd. We were there every night. For some crowds. I was a young cop. I was only on the job about a year, if that then.
It's interesting. So the officer that I interviewed a lot, and I still stay in touch with him, is Tony Schiozzi. You know that name?
No, I don't.
So Giuliani Schiozzi is his official name. He was born in Italy, came here, and became a police officer. He was actually an orphan when he came here. He was adopted and became a police officer in NYPD. He was on the job for about 1 year, and he was stationed in the press circle on Unity Day, 1971. And he was the officer that ran at Jerome Johnson after the bullets started flying, tackled him, knocked the gun out of his hand, and cuffed Jerome Johnson. He was also the officer that went with another cop to Roosevelt Hospital. Many people don't know that, you know, Jerome Johnson was still alive at the time that he got shot in the press junket circle. He didn't pass away until about an hour later in Roosevelt Hospital. But I tracked him down and I did a lot of interviewing with him, and he was like yourself, 1 year on the force at the time that all this madness was happening.
Yeah, there were, I would say, a minimum of 200 cops there that day. I mean, everywhere, for obvious reasons.
It was Seidman said it was the largest police presence in the history of NYPD at that time. Plus you had FBI, you know, it was like, I can't imagine it not being closer to, you know, 250, including all the feds
and undercover people. And when you interviewed him, you have to understand. I was only informed you were going to be on the show today, so I haven't had the pleasure of reading your book. I will, but you know, you're going to be filling us in basically.
It's funny because I commented in a blurb about the offer that somebody said something about, and I just gave my 2 cents on Instagram, and Don called me right up. So I said, wait a minute, what are you doing later on tonight? We're going to do this.
You know, and I thought that could probably be better fit for the topic of what we're going over, which is, you know, the Godfather film, since there's so much happening with all that. Yes, that's why I reached out to Gianni today was, you know, the depiction of Al Ruddy's version of how all this happened. And, you know, as far as all the people that I've interviewed, I've interviewed Al Ruddy, I interviewed Gianni, I've interviewed quite a few people involved with the film directly. It's just interesting to watch, is what I'll have to say, because it's a very much a whitewash. It's very much, self.
Yeah.
The critics are not in love with that series. I mean, to say the least, they slammed it.
Yeah.
But what you want to know, or a portion of what you're looking for, you're looking at the guy who was supposed to be there that day, Gianni Russo. It was part of history, but at the time, who knew? Gianni, for the listeners who weren't subscribers during the time we spoke about this, maybe you want to give a rough background on that day and why you weren't there when you were supposed to be there.
Oh, well, that on the dais, he means, yeah. Well,
yeah.
I got a call. I don't know if you know this, Don. I got a call from Tommy Bilotti.
Okay.
And he said to me, "You going to the rally?" I said, "Yeah, I'm on the dais." He said, "Well, the old man don't want you to go," meaning Gambino. I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Don't go near it." I said, "Tommy, I got to go. The guy got me to part in the movie." He said, "You're not going." He hung up on me.
Yeah.
Thank God I called Barry Slotnick, because I called Barry. I said, "Barry, I got stomach trouble today. The only place I'm going to be sitting is on a toilet." Because when they looked at the investigated photographs, the FBI and all that, they saw my name on a chair and I wasn't there. Why wasn't I there?
Yeah.
Which created another whole problem.
What did you think? What did you think, Gianni, when you were told by Tommy Bilotti not to go? What went through your mind?
Well, we all knew prior. Obviously, Don didn't, and Anthony did. That the whole other four families were against this rally. They called up people not to go. It was supposed to be a much bigger rally, but they actually campaigned against it. But never thinking, we thought, I thought he just wanted to be a flop compared to the first one.
That was a hell of a flop.
But never thinking they were going to shoot him. So,
yeah. I mean, we were probably 2 hours before the start of the event when the shooting actually happened. So it was still preparation. It was only about 20,000 people there at the time of the shooting.
Right.
No one had done anything yet. As a matter of fact, Joe was still organizing stuff with, because he can't stop working, right? That was who he was. And he was organizing stuff between some of the vendors that were there, having arguments about where they were positioned and whatnot. And he just gets, he's a micromanager.
Right.
And I think that was one of the last things he did was with two of the vendors that were having an argument. And then he went back into the press circle to say hello to some people. And that's when the news reporter, or the disguised news reporter, Jerome Johnson, as Joe turned his head from him, pulled out the Menta automatic and shot him 3 times in the back of the head.
Well, that's obviously what they had planned. Nobody knew that. So, obviously if somebody else knew that, it wouldn't have happened. But it's a situation where Tommy's call for me was just not to be involved in it. And
I think that was just feigning support. So
Yeah.
Carl and Joe had quite a few arguments over it. And, one of the things, which is why it was always funny that there was a promoted story that Joe was taking money from the league. In actuality, the people that I knew said that Joe couldn't afford to keep it running without borrowing from so many different friends of his. And they were just like, look, you don't have a budget for this thing, and you're just dumping money into this thing endlessly. Wanted to build the hospital in Brooklyn, built Camp Unity in upstate New York.
Right.
All the funding and all of the time that he was spending and dedicating to that, he was, I guess, losing his business sense towards the other business, and aggravating a lot of people for the public display, which ended up costing.
No,
his life.
he definitely became an advocate for the reasons and what he believed in. And what he was doing prior to that was secondary at this point.
Right.
So he got caught up in it. Got caught up in the mission.
For our listeners who don't know what the Anti-Defamation League was, you can explain it better than me, Don.
Yeah. So Joe had always had these sentiments towards the government. I think it's probably started mainly after he came back from the war. And a lot of people in Brooklyn at that time, some people don't know that if they were Italian immigrants, they were messed with by the FBI. There was radios taken from people's homes. There were bank accounts that were frozen. The Italians were obviously on the Axis side, and there were, a lot of communist Italians. So there were a lot of anarchist Italians. And Joe was an Italian American who was proud of being an American, goes and fights in the war, sees a lot of action, comes home and sees his neighborhood getting ruffled up by all Hoover boys. So it started back then, and I think that he probably suppressed it for many years. And then in the late 1960s, it sparked up again for him. And he was one of the people that helped found AID, which was run kind of by a bunch of doctors and lawyers. And what Joe thought would be best for the program was to take a back seat, and allow these other people to run the program. Frank Sinatra was heavily involved in AID. It was Americans of Italian descent, I think, was the actual moniker. So there, he needed their help after his son was arrested falsely for the coin case in 1970. And they all just kind of backed away and said, look, we're not going to get involved in fighting the FBI. And Joe felt they were just in a cushioned position, and they liked doing their, meetings, and they liked having their dinners, but they didn't want to really get in the streets. So that's when he formed the Italian American Civil Rights League. And from there, he just took it to the streets himself. He decided, I'm not going to lay in the background anymore. I'm not going to watch this kind of stuff happen. And I'm going to put people to work that want to work. So that's when he recruited, Nat Marcone, and he had Steve Aiello, he had Dick Capizzola, and he had a lot of guys that were already civil rights activists that wanted to really get in the streets and get dirty.
So when was he told, and by who was he told, to back off, and why?
Well, that was after the first rally, they brought him in because he was getting just too much attention. I remember that. I can almost remember the Sunday morning that he came down to the neighborhood to meet. I mean, they were pissed. And, but, he was, not that he said he wouldn't, he just listened. And they all kissed and said goodbye, and he went back to doing what he was doing.
He was type A,
Yeah.
I've always said, after the numerous amounts of people I interviewed that knew him, and taking all that information in and drawing up a profile, that Joe was probably meant to be more of a political figure than he was to be a mob leader. I think his leadership in the streets in that short period of time and all of the different things that he accomplished proved that. It was something that was in his bones.
Well, and just his DNA and his language and his elocution. And that's why the way I only heard Ribisi is portraying him like a street hood.
Yeah.
With the D's and Do's, and that wasn't Joe. If you knew Joe was very eloquent.
Yeah, it's a shame too, because I know the series, The Offer, we're talking about, that comes directly from, Al Ruddy. And I've interviewed Al, and I have him on tape. I have lengthy discussions, and Mark Seal has interviewed Al. Mark Seal has interviewed Bob Evans, and I have him quoted. I have him on tape saying about how when he arrived at the Park Sheraton Hotel and he first met Joe Columbo, he's looking through all these 100 people that are there, and then he sees Joe and he sees the guy, and he called him an average looking man, immaculately dressed, and he was the antithesis of what you thought a mobster would be. He was a businessman, and I think the quote was, none of this I'll kill you or this or that, and that's exactly how they painted the character in The Offer, was the caricature. I hate to say it, it's what Jewish producers have done in Hollywood for many years, which was just this over the top gangster that's got the accent,
the image
and the
that's
swagger
embedded in Hollywood, and that's what it's about. Unfortunately,
the irony is that the Godfather film that Ruddy produced finally got it right, and that's why it's one of the greatest films of all time, is that they took the seasoning of a writer like Puzo and a writer like Coppola, both two of the better writers on the planet.
Yeah, but you see, you know what you're saying there, Don? Puzo and Coppola made that movie. Ruddy supervised it. Ruddy was happy to be supervising it.
Evans made sure the funding was there, and he put Ruddy on it because Ruddy was cheap, right? Ruddy,
oh my God, he used to sleep on my pool table on Elm Drive. I know Al Ruddy a long time before this movie. My connection with Al was Betty McCart,
the assistant.
Yeah.
So, Al, I give him all the credit in the world because of what he did, this feat that he did. And so did Anthony. And so, that's why it's kind of upsetting to me is that he was really the hero of The Godfather to stay in the ring, especially going up against Bluthorn and, making sure that Francis had everything that he needed or he was going to detach himself from the project as well.
But even my character, he supported me. I was a non-actor. And he was the only person that actually spoke up for me. And because even Coppola didn't hire me at all. I did no audition for Coppola, but they said he's playing Carlo. And Joe said it. He's playing Carlo. That's who said it.
My favorite quote, I think it's in the book, in our book, is that he said, without Joe Columbo's involvement, we wouldn't have a Godfather picture at all, but we definitely wouldn't have the Godfather film that we have today. And a lot of people that I met that were involved in that film said that because there was many things that he helped bring to the table that kept the authenticity and kept the New York energy. So, once the league made the agreement to work with the film, it's like, well, what does that actually mean? Well, the first thing it means is that publicly the Italian American community and everyone accepted it because at that time the league was the strongest force in Italian American community. And
he could dictate to communities, which he did, to get locations, even restaurant tours that didn't want to participate. He put his back to it and said, "This is what we're going to help them."
Yeah,
and that's what the film is today. That's what we know 50 years later.
Yeah, it's interesting to see these crafted stories about especially Bob Evans. I've never met Bob Evans. I did not get to interview him for my book, but some of the stories that I've read, I've heard from people that were in it that said this is not true, this is not true, this is false, and I knew he was a man that was kind of full of himself, and he was very heavily into the party scene. I love his character in The Offer, though.
That's why I wouldn't even watch it, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
people ask me if I watch it. I'm going to watch it.
Yeah, the first episode was hard. I enjoyed Bob Evans and I enjoyed the Al Ruddy character because I like the way that they have them placed, and also the Coppola character and the Puzo. But once I see Joe and the way that they're depicting him, so I reached out to Giovanni Ribisi's agent and I believe his publicist, and I sent them this information that, look, I'm the authority on Joe Columbo. I also have 14 hours worth of tape that no one has seen before that was filmed during the Italian American Civil Rights League meetings of Joe Columbo speaking. So you can see his mannerisms, his composure, his delivery, and understand how intelligent he is. Yes, he has a heavy Brooklyn accent, probably heavier than Giovanni's depicting in the film or the TV series, but they declined. And I don't know if it got to Giovanni. I want to give him the benefit of the doubt that Ribisi didn't even hear that this offer was there. But
well, unfortunately, an actor, even though he's a reputable actor, when it gets down to the producer and the director, that's the pattern.
Right.
And do your job. That's what we hired you for.
It's sad because it's so much more interesting to show smart characters. I think that, looking at the Godfather film, your character, everyone on that set that you saw had immense pressure at all times on their character, and everyone had to make a move. You had decisions to make, including Carlo, so that to me showed everybody's intelligence levels. Now people make mistakes, right? Obviously Carlo ill-fated for what he did, but he was trying to get ahead. Everyone that's the beauty of loyalty, right? Is that when you're pitching a film, you have the people that are disloyal, which make these great plot twists, make these amazing stories, these explosive pieces of art that we see on the moving screen. And that's kind of what lacked in The Offer for me. It's like, well, there's nothing to Joe. He's just this typical bippity boppity, I'm a gangster, I'm going to shut down the film. But the true story was that Joe didn't need to result in violence or threaten anyone because he had so much on lock. Like the unions, they sent a letter out to anyone in New York City and said that right now we are trying to negotiate something with Paramount,
We
so
are
no one is to
expanding
work with this film until we
not only the
negotiate
show,
our situation
not
with them.
only I know
So
how you can participate.
Evans is getting all
and
these
share
calls
into
that
so many
these
different
locations
parts of my life
disappeared.
and the
The
life of this
the
podcast
Teamsters are
and
not
the
going to
way
work with
created.
them. There's going to be no
We are gonna
drivers. There's going to be no
expand our
workers that we
family.
can pick up. So his
You're
first
gonna have
thought was
an
like, all right, we'll shoot it on the lot
and no
in
locations.
Hollywood.
Yeah,
And no
which they
locations.
never.
It'll be up to
Frank
you how far
Coppola
you
would
go.
have never allowed that. How could you shoot that movie on a lot?
He said you can shoot it on a lot in Hollywood. I'm not going to do the film unless it's in New York.
Right.
And Ruddy backed
Like
that.
having a
Ruddy
one-on-one.
Oh,
stood
yeah.
firm, and he backed that it had to be done in New York City.
Why you have
And
10 people for dinner.
that's when
There's
they knew they had
so
to go
many
meet with
things
Joe.
you're gonna be
And for
so
Joe,
excited.
a lot of people
Just
are
go
like,
to
well, he took the word
HollywoodGodfatherFamily.com.
mafia and the Cosa Nostra script. What did that really do? Well, you have to look at the micro and then step back and look at the macro. What he explained to his son was that, Anthony, this isn't about taking two words out of a script. This is a public engagement of the Italian American Civil Rights League and a powerhouse film company from Hollywood, Paramount, making an agreement. And we will publicize this agreement, and people will know that we have the power to change things in media. And, that's a big statement to make. It's not about the words, it's the bigger picture. And Joe was always thinking 5 years ahead, 10 years ahead.
Right.
Unfortunately, the demise, wouldn't allow us to see the fruits of that labor and what would have, really been as a relationship with film companies and the Italian American Civil Rights League.
What did you think that Joe Columbo thought was going to be his sanction for not listening to his bosses? I mean, was his ego was he ego driven to that point? Was he getting power hungry? He was a powerful guy with this, powerful guy, period. But once he got involved with the Italian Civil Rights League, I mean, he was running his city. He was.
Did he get thirsty for their drunk with that power? It's a question I've racked in my head for many, many months while writing the book. And then another thought, that came to my mind only was that, did he know that his fate was sealed by going public? And then he just said, I'm going to get as much work done as I can before whatever happens to me happens. And there's a great passage in my book when Anthony and him are riding to the upstate home in Blooming Grove from the city during a lot of league activity. This is about maybe a month before the Unity Day shooting. And Anthony and him got into an argument because he knew that he needed to stop doing this stuff and he wasn't doing it. And he told Anthony, get out of the car, walk home. Get out of the effing car. And that was one other thing I wanted to bring up. Joe never really cursed. They have BC continuously cursing, and it was something that Joe just didn't do. So this story of the family, I think him and JoJo got into a big heated argument over his involvement because it was a lot of chatter. Gianni, about that. There was a lot of people talking about him being in the media spotlight that was not favored.
Oh, no, not at all.
I've been a PI for 30 years, and these books are based on
and then
cases.
Again, the other thing that I was, because I know Joe DeChico, I know everybody that was in that family, especially even Junior and all. These guys are all, well, they're all dead now, but the bottom line is, I was wondering who's going to try to make a move on Joe to just take the position over and go see, because that's how Joe, the history of Joe, that's how he got the family.
Right.
Because when the Pafacci's were going to try to kill Gambino, he told them.
Yeah.
So
that was Bonanno's plan thwarted. They actually open up the offer with that, which is another thing I would love to fix for them. I wish they just reached out, because for nothing I would have given them clues on how to make this more interesting. So they open up with Bonanno sitting down Joe and telling them that he has to put the hit out on Gambino and he'll get a seat at the commission.
Oh, wow.
The truth was it was Mel. Yeah, they open with it. The offer opens with Joe Columbo and Bonanno. So
that's interesting. Wow.
The true story, Profaci was already passed away. Malyoc was actually running the Profaci family.
Right.
The Gallo conflict was still happening. And when Malyoc went to Columbo, who was a trusted person to take out Gambino, the thing that he never knew was that Gambino had been mentoring him since he was 14 years old, since his father was killed in Brooklyn. is Gambino and Joe Columbo's father were very close friends. They lived a block away from each other in Sheepshead Bay. Right. And Joe was mentored by him behind the curtain. No one really knew what was happening with that relationship, especially because you see, if you look at the crime side of it, that Joe goes into the Columbo family, or the Profaci family, and not the Gambino family. And that was all purposeful. One of the things I've always said after doing all the research with him is that
was Gambino's plan subconsciously.
Or I think possibly Joe Columbo's plan, because he sought his father's killers.
Right.
And they were all in that group. You know, so to get in that group and have access to those stories and be around those, you know, keep your enemies closer, not pinning any murders on him. But in 1967 and 1968, which is about 30 years after his father was murdered, 6 of the men, these were older men, all died that year that were involved in his father's slaying.
Right.
You know, so there was a retribution, and there was a revenge factor to possibly why Joe got involved in the rackets to begin with.
That character could have been made so much deeper than what they portrayed in that film, and that's a crime.
Yeah,
it's
especially with
Don,
the access of
there's a new project for you right there.
Yeah. I mean, we definitely love to go out with it, both forms, documentary and limited series. I think if you remember Man of Honor years ago, so that was our agent, rest in peace, Mickey Freiberg, who repped Bonanno also. He was the agent on the Columbo book when I was writing it. And unfortunately, he passed away right when I finished the book. Mm-hmm. But his plan for this was always to get a docuseries going and then follow up the docuseries with a mini series or a limited series on all the chapters.
I'm even thinking bigger than that, because after Godfather 1 was such a success, they brought Godfather 2 out to show you how it started.
Which was amazing.
But this could be to know what Joe Columbo's mission was.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, because his youth is so tumultuous. I mean, he was 14. He was on the streets of Brooklyn. His mother was so scared after the murder, she moved to California with his sister. So he was on the streets of Brooklyn, staying at his aunt's house, staying at his grandmother's house, and just got involved in the rackets from the time he was a teenager.
Yeah.
How old was Joe when he died?
This is bad that I don't know this answer. He was 43 in he was probably 50. Well, when he died, so he was shot, and then he lingered in a coma for 7 years.
5 or 7.
So it was 1978 when he passed away, which would have, he was born in 1923. What's the math on that? 33, 43, 53, 73. He was
55.
55? Yeah. 53, 63, 73, 55 years old.
Wow. Yeah, had he have stuck around, he would have been, he could have been the man. You know, when did Gambino die? 72?
72, yeah.
Well, Gambino, he could have never been, because O'Neill got stepped over with Paul Castellano. That was inside. Nobody else was taking that position.
Yeah, for the Gambino family.
No,
so I think Gambino was actually in the mid 70s, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was 75 or 76 when he passed.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean,
okay, you've certainly opened up a lot of eyes, Don.
But Don, I think you got a major project. I think we just to me
we got to keep talking. We need to sit down and have some coffee, and you introduce me to some of your amazing Hollywood friends.
Well,
my Hollywood friends don't do anything for you, believe me. It's just you have to have the fajoules and balls like we have. That's what we get done.
Well, I'm looking forward to reading. I'm really looking forward to reading this book. I mean, as soon as we stop recording tonight, I'm on Amazon. It sounds fascinating.
Yeah, I'm also very grateful for coming on the show to discuss the offer. I still haven't finished the whole series yet, so I'm going to keep watching.
Well, nobody has. It develops. You only have 3 episodes up that you.
Oh, they are. They're not streaming it all at once. Okay.
Right. No, it's stretched out. It's 10 episodes. But
okay, Don. Thank you very much for gracing us with your presence. I mean, this is really enlightening.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Pat. And Gianni, thank you for putting me on so quickly.
No,
Okay,
I mean,
once
it's so interesting. In fact,
Columbo,
a thought just came
Unsolved
to me without even talking to Pat. Once you see the whole series, I'd like to have you back on, right, Pat? Let him,
Absolutely. Yeah.
just because, like us, we know about it
Right.
from different viewpoints. And so
Okay,
far,
what's-
the reviews we've heard are terrible.
Right.
Once again, Don, the name of your book is Columbo, The Unsolved Murder by Don Capria and Anthony Edward Columbo.
Yes.
Definitely pick it up. It sounds very interesting, to say the least.
Yeah. Thank you, Pat. Thank you both.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it, man. Please.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right. We're going to take a fast break, and we're coming back with the mailbag. Today's show is being sponsored by Corleone Fine Italian Food Products. This sponsor really means a lot to me. Corleone Fine Italian has taken the heart and soul of the Godfather films and created a line of food products that include pasta sauce, balsamic vinegar from Modena, Italy, Genco extra virgin olive oil from Sicily. They created delicious pasta, tomato basil, arrabbiato, and my favorite, Clemenza's meat sauce. You will be amazed. You will think your grandmother made the sauce herself. CorleoneFineItalian.com. That's Corleone. Okay, we're back for the Pat and I love this part of the show, the mailbag. We get an opportunity to hear what you all are thinking about, what you'd like us to talk about, and tell your friends, because this is an intricate part of what we do and why we do it, is to hear from you.
We are fountains of information.
Please.
All right, here we go. This is from Tanya. I'm not sure if this is possible. I don't know what's coming now here. Okay. I'm not sure if this is possible, but I thought I would ask. My husband, Mike, is a true and dedicated fan of yours, obviously. No one knows who I am. Anyway, I'm wondering if that there is an opportunity to have Mr. Russo come to a small house party. I am thinking of late June or early July for my husband's birthday.
Well, I mean, let's talk about it. First of all, where do you live?
If you live on 63rd Street on the east side, it's a short walk, But anyway, you answered your question.
No, I mean, just write me an email. And how should we do this, Pat? Should I give my personal email? No.
No, I tell you what, Tanya, who will be listening to this show next week, write to the same email address that you wrote this email to with some more information. Where is this party?
And how do we get in touch with you?
Yeah, well, I have her email address.
All
That's
right.
no problem.
Yeah.
Okay, so
let's find out where that is first, because maybe it's impossible.
Yeah, I'm sure if you're available, Johnny, you'd be happy to go.
I'd be, yes.
This is a fan. I mean, after all, we are nothing except for our fans.
All right,
okay.
Perfect.
Second question. This is from Vinny.
Because you know how
George was a great listen. That was George. What's his last name? I forget.
George Pecoraro.
Pecoraro. How can I forget that? It's almost anyway. George was a great listen, and I hope to hear a lot offering him.
I'm sure you'll want to wear it.
I'm getting pop-ups here. Excuse me, folks. I'm blocking out the email. Okay. I hope to hear a lot more from him as part of the show. Between he and Gianni, I could listen to them for hours about their lifetime experience.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Who was that?
Nice.
Who was that guy?
That was from Vinny.
Vinny. Hey, Vinny. Oh, okay.
Vinny, yo, Vinny. All right. Next. All right. This is from William. Hello, Mr. Russo. I have enjoyed many of your interviews. I am an historian and writer based in Los Angeles. I'm sorry. I just bear with me here. These goddamn pop-ups keep on popping up, blocking out these emails. All right. I am a historian and writer based in Los Angeles. I just finished a book manuscript, many years in the making, and need a few photo identifications that you may be able to help me with. So here comes the question or the background. My book is about 4 young Los Angeles amateur boxers who went to the 1924 Paris Olympic Games. One of my boxers, the late, great Jackie Fields, went on to become a welterweight champion of the world in 1929. In the early 1950s, Fields moved to Las Vegas and was among the original investors in the Tropicana. He would be associated with the casino for many years as a pit boss and greeter. I have a few 3 to 4 photographs of Fields in the casino in the 50s, 60s, and early 70s, given to me by his daughter, Michelle Fields, Sharp, and need help identifying people. If you think you can help, please send me an email. I'll be most appreciative. Well, we can say the same thing to William as we said to Tonya.
Well, the thing is, I knew Jackie Fields because while he was working there, he was working for Costello. And that's in the 70s is when I had my Tiffany's Club there. I knew Jackie Fields.
Okay,
so what does he want us to do?
I'm going to advise William to send us the pictures, the same email address where you sent this email, and Johnny will see them.
Yeah, and I'll tell you who's in them.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way it works.
Yep.
So how well did you know this guy?
I knew him, I knew him about 20 years.
Wow.
Jackie Fields.
Small world.
Yep.
Okay. This one is from Maria Elena. Oh, love that name. Could you please send me information on Gianni's Columbus Day show in Atlantic City?
Resorts International, October 8th.
One show, 2 shows?
The show, that's the show. Johnny Russo, I'm the main showroom.
No, I mean, one show that night or 2?
Just one show. No, one show.
All right, that answers that. That may be the last one for this evening.
Yeah, I mean, all our audiences, if you are interested in coming to that show, contact the casino, tickets or whatever, or if you have a casino host, and make your reservation. It's Columbus Day weekend, and I'm sure it's going to be sold out.
Do you think they can get the tickets to Ticketmaster? That's usually the route people go.
I think it's too early yet, but I think whoever runs that, I mean, I know everybody there, but I mean, whoever they have, just call the box office. Tell them you want tickets.
Okay, then. Well, that's it for the emails for this evening.
All right. Well, great. I wish we had more to answer, but we don't. Thank you all for tuning in again. We have a great show coming up next week. We can't tell you what it's about, but I guarantee you it's going to be exciting. Pat, another great show. Thank you, my friend.
Okay, Gianni, you have a very good evening, and I'll see you next week.
Definitely.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
If you're feeling sad and lonely, there's a service I could render. I'm the one who loves you only. I could be so warm, so tender. Call me. Don't be afraid, you can call me. Maybe it's late, but just
Thank you for tuning in to the Hollywood Godfather podcast. You can contact Gianni Russo, Patrick Picciarelli, or myself, Megan Horan, with your questions and comments through the contact section of our website, HollywoodGodfatherPodcast.com, which is where you can also subscribe to our weekly newsletter. You can also call and leave us a message at 646-776-3038. Remember to follow us on Instagram at Hollywood Godfather and on Facebook, as well as leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We'd like to know what you'd like about what we're doing, what you'd like to hear in the future, and anything else you might suggest to improve our podcast. Most importantly, hit the subscribe button. We'll be back next week with stories of the mob in Hollywood, as well as answers to your messages. Good night.
Call me. Don't be afraid, you can call me. Maybe it's late, but just call me. Tell me and I'll be around. I'll be around. Give me a call. When I was 17, it was a very good year. It was a very good year for small town girls and soft summer nights. We'd hide from the lights on the village green when I was 17. I did it my